the CEO of the Global Environment Facility. Second, President Wallace Loh of the University of Maryland. And third, Nigel Topping, who is President of We Mean Business. And the exam question for you is broadly the same. Based on what you've heard, based upon the need for urgent action, how are you, as leaders in your space, who not only have the ability to influence within your own sphere, your own institution, but actually you are opinion makers as well, what are you focusing on in 2016? Naoko.
Yeah, thank you. So happy to be here. What really excites me now is this emerging global and local movements to support global commons. The year 2015, with climate agreement, but also SDG, has put this important subject of global commons such a center stage of public discussion. It was clear from these two agreements that the health of the global commons, your ocean, your forest, your water, and of course climate, it's so essential for the prospect of the future, our generation and the generation to come. So that is so important, and now we have already seen, so clear from previous speakers, that climate change, land degradation, loss of biodiversity have already put a lot of brakes on the prosperity, aspiration for the prosperity. The second thing which is so exciting to me is this, these two agreements. It's not just coming from the top leadership. It's really coming from the bottom, your citizens and the community and CSOs, business and everybody. So these new two movements, that the global, local movements to support global commons was really, really exciting. Peter Bakker mentioned this co-creation of partnership coming from Paris. It's so important, but we need to keep momentum of that to how to strengthen those multi-stakeholder platform from community to cabinet, from smallholders on the ground to shareholder in the big CEO room, and from philanthropy to finance. How we want to create and continue to strengthen those platforms on each of the key global commons issue, be it cities, on the ocean, or the forest and land. That's something I'm waking up every morning to make sure our action really create and catalyze the actions on the ground.
Good, thank you, Naoko. You run the Global Fund for the Global Commons that has been endorsed by every nation virtually on the planet. And your point, I think, is that if we could get as excited about the other aspects of the Global Commons, such as biodiversity, the oceans, and so on, actually that would synergize beautifully with the climate change work. Just tell us a little more about what you're doing. I know you're planning some very interesting work this year on the Global Commons.
Yes, sure. As also clear to everybody, we really need a massive, massive transformation of the key economic system, be it energy system, that how we eat, how to produce food, and how to live in cities. So what we are trying to do together with all of you is to continue to create and enhance those platforms. In case of, say, cities, we were very, very happy to work with a lot of mayors, including in this room, and also the partners like ICLEI C40, WRI, to support, say, that the global compact of mayors, and we are trying to help mayors to do more integrated, sustainable planning, but also like how to make transit, public transit, how to do the building system, how to make the district heating system more sustainable. And our role is not only work with the city mayors as a regulator, the planner, but bring the business, bring the finance to make this massive needs to be fully financed. That's one. For food production system, I know here in this audience that the business leaders in the Indonesia, the Singapore, working for the global commodities like palm oil. I know there is a leader from Brazil working for the soybeans, Farmers Association, leader of the Farmers Association working for soybeans and cattle, so that what we are trying to do is again to create and enhance this multi-stakeholder platform along the supply chain of those global commodities to take the deforestation out of the system and working with those and the people, communities, the business and the finance, of course the consumers, the Consumer Goods Forum, we are partnering with them. So how we can work together to take the deforestation out of this food production system.
Great, thank you, Naoko. It's important that we understand how sort of radical this is, as Naoko is sort of reshaping the Global Environment Facility. Sort of the old-fashioned approach, not that the Jeff was ever old-fashioned, the old-fashioned approach is to sort of go for the symptoms or go for the obvious, an extreme version, protect a park or protect a marine area, which is good. But what Naoko's saying is, actually, you've got to go for the fundamental economic drivers. We've got to think about how we live in cities, how we consume, how we run our supply chains, and so on. So we wish you the best, and we want to support you in that effort. President Wallace Loh, you lead the University of Maryland, which has been a real leader in this space, both in terms of research and in the way you live your lives and the way you operate your own institutions, and you've done many great things. Most importantly, you hired Bob Orr to run your School of Public Policy. Tell us what's on your mind.
Of all the stakeholders who are here today, because it takes people from across the entire economy and society to implement climate action, I am glad that universities are represented. I know that in this group, representatives of Universitas 21, approximately 25, 27 of the finest research universities from all 6 continents are here today. And many of them are leaders like myself, and you all understand when I say that we have a motto. To have a vision, such as the vision of the Paris Agreement, no matter how ambitious, how fearless, how urgent, to have a vision without an action plan and budget is hallucination. We are not in the hallucination business. We are in the business of taking action. And so for universities to be involved, quite honestly, what is needed is a process that is already going on, the reinvention of the modern university. The historical vision of a university is an ivory tower. At the top of that tower, you create new ideas, develop new analyses, you advance knowledge. But in the 21st century, you must have at the bottom of that ivory tower innovation incubators that translate that knowledge, those tools of analysis, to make an impact on the great challenges of the day. And of course, the greatest challenge of all probably is the climate crisis. So what are the kinds of reinventions that are already going on? Number one, it is not just enough to have all of these climate scientists, and they are outstanding climate scientists and policy wonks. We must, in that innovation incubator, translate that research, that data, to have a practical impact on policymakers. And many of our faculty are primarily focused on advancing basic research, basic knowledge, rather than translating it to practical applications. That translation is almost a discipline in and of itself. Number two, to address the issues of climate change, because if we are to have a climate-reliant society and economy, that will require transformations in our society and economy. That means we have to bring together the contributions of all other disciplines as well. It has to be an interdisciplinary approach. And one concrete example, at the University of Maryland, we hire about 120 faculty members. We have about 80 different departments. Rather than hiring people individually for each department, we should set, and we're beginning to do this, define, here is a cluster of 40 to 50 faculty appointments, all focused on climate change. And they can come from different departments. So you're still rostered in your individual department, but you have a common mission and a common agenda. That is one way of starting to reinvent. And the final one I would say is this. The business that we're in as a university is we are in the immortality business. We are in the business of transferring knowledge to the next generation and thereby transforming their lives, and they transfer it to the next generation. The work of faculty and staff at the university extends through eternity. I say this because the ultimate impact of a university on climate change is going to be the next generation. It's the millennial generation. They are passionate about this issue. And what we must do to reinvent, we have to embed the issues and the challenges of climate change into our curriculum across the entire curriculum. So it's not just you specialize in this area, no matter whether it's English, it's ethics, it's public policy, engineering, it is climate science, you deal with those issues across the whole curriculum. And I will simply conclude by saying this. All of us are climate leaders, regardless of the sector that we work in. And leadership, very simply, is helping to take our constituents not to where they want to go, but where they ought to go.
Wow, thank you. You should have been a preacher, or maybe you are. You're in the business of immortality, and that is great. And I believe it, by the way. Could you just say, it was wonderful what you said about young people, bright students at the University of Maryland and elsewhere. They absolutely get it, and they don't get why today's generation is still running the economy the old-fashioned way. How engaged are they in whether you'd call it a protest or an engagement? And do you see any prospects for that sort of gaining momentum?
They are very engaged. I would say perhaps the most consuming passion of the students that we see today, and they are a very activist generation. They are digital natives. They grew up with mobile devices. And it is a highly decentralized process. It is not top-down, it is bottom-up. And they are learning in a different way. The old days when you had a professor standing on the stage and giving lectures, those days are over. They expect to download their lectures on the mobile devices, and when they come to class, they are working collaboratively on specific projects. And the way that we will reinvent the curriculum, reinvent the pedagogy, is that the projects that they work on across different disciplines is on projects having to do with the climate crisis. And there is something that Al Gore said that resonates so deeply with me, and I know it resonates with the millennial generation. Ours is the first generation to experience the effects of climate change. Ours is also the last generation to be able to do something about it. And that last generation is really the millennial generation.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Wallace. That is great. So Nigel, you're CEO of We Mean Business, and I know you do mean business because we saw you in the lead up to Paris. What are you doing this year, and what's on your mind?
Well, I mean, we're all really focused on action, but I think for me, what's really different this year is we got such a strong signal out of Paris to the future, and such a step forward in our confidence of our ability to organise multilaterally, the non-state actors and the state actors. So I think what we're really focusing on is how can we get much, much clearer about the future that we're all committed to building. So there's a couple of examples of some ways in which I think it's quite mature and other ways in which it's not so strong. So one example where I think we're really at the beginning is the electrification of the vehicle fleet. You know, we've got quite sophisticated ideas now of what we need to do in terms of renewable energy, decentralized energy, energy efficiency, but the majority of people still think that we're going to be driving internal combustion engines in 2060. Right? That's just A, it's not going to happen. B, policy that assumes that, because that's kind of a hegemonic view, will not be future-proof. So we've got, you know, Apple rumored to be just about to start building electric vehicles in Austria. We've got Google partnering with Fiat. We've got Tesla selling 400,000 vehicles of a model they've never built. Just unbelievable. Now I heard Bill de Blasio talking about the New York City having 100% electric vehicles in its own fleet by 2025. Talk about stories, Rachel. You start to be able to see the day when the island of Manhattan is gasoline-free in the 2020s. If you want to drive a gas car to Manhattan, you have to park it at the bridge, right? We know we have 3 ministries in India talking about 100% electric personal vehicles in India by 2030. So, and yet we haven't got most of the. We're not having a courageous enough conversation about when will we build the last internal combustion engine? When will it be in a museum? So that's one area where we've got a lot of work to do this year, and I think it's starting. Peter mentioned it. We'll be doing some work on it to have a grown-up conversation about the accelerated transition to electric vehicles. Another example where we're getting much better, we've talked about carbon pricing. We now have 1,000 companies implementing carbon pricing. The work which we did with the guys at CDP with all their data on developing the pathway for how carbon pricing needs to develop, we think that's very aligned with Minister Royal's idea of a carbon pricing corridor. And everybody wants a kind of, what is the band that we need to be aiming for? So not just the price today, but where's it going to be in 5 or 10 years? Because it's expectations that drive investment, not spot prices. And I think the thing that we've really got right emerging out of Paris is a very clear set of norms of business ambition. The work that WRI are doing with WWF and CDP on setting science-based targets, that's over 150 companies. That's going up every day, Andrew. It's incredible. I think it'll be 250 by the end of this year. And that's necessary because of some of these other forces. Investors are asking, what's your 2-degree plan? Civil society is asking, what's your 2-degree plan? So things like science-based targets, the sectoral collaboration that Peter talked about, the 100% renewables, which is kind of a norm almost in consumer goods and high-tech now, are giving us a much clearer roadmap of what we need to do going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I take you back to something you said? We aren't thinking enough about the transition to 100% electric or whatever. Peter said we need to have a different attitude towards big oil and gas, and we need to engage more. Do you sense that we're close to seeing an oil and gas major that actually would have a strategy that they would lay out to say this is the kind of company in 2050 that we want to become?
I think so. I mean, maybe this year. You know, the activist investors, the Aiming for A Coalition and others have been getting like BP and Shell to boards to support proxy resolutions asking for exactly that kind of transparency. What is your plan for a 2-degree world? So I think we'll see that, how good it will be. The tires will be kicked on it very hard. But I think there are several of the oil majors working on exactly those plans right now, yeah.
That's very good. And just about We Mean Business, you originally set yourselves up to sort of really make a push to Paris, but you've now realized actually the battle's not won. There's a lot still to do. What are your plans for the coming year?
Well, it's really to continue to drive collaboration, because one thing that we all know is frustrating is this fragmentation and 25 different initiatives doing basically the same thing. So scaling up of ambition, so not just 100 companies committed to RE100, but make that a norm, so 1,000 companies commit that. Make sure that the transparency is in place. We're working with CDP to do an annual report on progress from all of these major initiatives so that everyone can see that the commitments that were being made are being delivered. And then helping policymakers understand just how much momentum there is from the private sector in support of bold climate policies, so that when we get to 2020 and add up the INDCs, it comes to a figure that starts with a 1, not with a 2.
That's fantastic. We've got less than a minute to go. Anybody want to say a final word?
Yes, it's really exciting to hear all of those commitments. I really want to make this global commons everybody's business. The challenge ahead of us is that then after Paris, everybody had this wonderful commitment and the wonderful multi-stake platform, the commitment. But then when we come back from Paris and every Monday morning, it's still so difficult to work across silos that the president mentioned. This we are still very much in kind of silos, the boundary in the discipline. I actually found also the very true in our business. We are still very much organized by this institutional business kind of silos. How we can really break those man-made silos and to make the global commons everybody's business. I'm really wake up every morning to think about it. I really hope that we can really work together to make this happen.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. You wanted to say just one word? Nope. Thank you so much. Look, I think we were all very struck by the sense of urgency that's come through this morning. I'm really encouraged to hear both of these panels. Thank you, both panels, for sort of conveying that. Benjamin Franklin said, "Time lost is never found." And how true that is. And that basically means that, every day we better get to work and realize what's going on. And talking of time and good news, it's now time, I believe, for coffee. So please thank this panel very much indeed.
Ladies and gentlemen, our session is now concluded. We'll have a 15-minute break and begin our next session at 11 o'clock.